Friends, hear also this reading from the Gospel of Matthew, which we have been reading text over the last several weeks. This week we begin with chapter 22, verse 34. It follows on the heels of an ongoing debate between Jesus, the Sadducees, and the Pharisees about Jesus' authority. Jesus has been criticizing the Pharisees, and they've been coming right back at him. Hear these verses from chapter 22. When the Pharisees heard that Jesus had silenced the Sadducees, they gathered together, and one of them, a lawyer, asked him a question to test him. "Teacher, which commandment in the law is the greatest?" And Jesus said to him, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the greatest and the first commandment. And a second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. On these two commandments hang all the law and the prophets." Now, while the Pharisees were gathered together, Jesus asked them a question. "What do you think of the Messiah? Whose son is he?" And they said to him, "Well, the son of David." And Jesus said to them, "How is it then that David by the Spirit calls the Messiah Lord, saying, 'The Lord said to my Lord, sit at my right hand until I put your enemies under your feet'? If David thus calls him Lord, how can he be David's son?" No one was able to answer him, nor from that day did anyone dare to ask Jesus any more questions. May God add a blessing to the reading and hearing of these holy words. Will you pray with me? God of extravagant grace, oil the hinges of our heart's doors, that they may swing easily open to welcome you. Amen. Honestly, I didn't know what to do with the second half of this gospel lesson this week. Not until I attended the Saugatuck Church Leadership Retreat yesterday morning, led by the Reverend Kent Salati, our Connecticut Conference minister. All week, in Bible study and in my own study, I kept revisiting this text, trying to unpack the baffling exchange between Jesus and the Pharisees, and wondering what is going on here. Why is Jesus asking them whether the Messiah is David's son, or whether King David would call him Lord? Why this odd and disconnected question? And then I took a seat in a circle of 23 Saugatuck leaders and listened to the Reverend Salati describe another conversation between Jesus and his disciples, one that's recorded in the Gospel of Mark. In it, Jesus asks, "Who do people say that I am?" And the disciples respond, "Well, some say John the Baptist, and some Elijah, and some one of the prophets." But Jesus persists and asks, "Who do you say that I am?" It is a question that leads to Peter making his life-changing confession of faith. A declaration which is also a declaration of love. "To me, you are the Messiah." I think that Jesus may have been pressing the Pharisees to contemplate that same question, if indirectly. What do you think of the Messiah? Not that Jesus expected them to make a Peter-style confession of faith. That was highly unlikely in any case. The Pharisees were Jesus' adversaries, clearly concerned that Jesus was there to cause trouble, to disrupt their faithful teachings and not to fulfill them. So rather than trying to convince them, Jesus poses his question. Tell me, what do you think of the Messiah? It may have been just one more riddle meant to trap the Pharisees in that ongoing battle of wits. But now I'm wondering whether it wasn't actually an attempt to draw them into deeper reflection. There's a tale, I don't know its origin, about a religious skeptic and a wise and faithful woman and a conversation that they had. I don't believe in God, says the skeptic, to which the wise woman replies, tell me about the God that you don't believe in. It's a lovely question, one designed to meet the skeptic where he is, inviting him to name what doesn't capture his heart on the way to unearthing what does. Maybe that's what Jesus was doing. So, you don't trust me, you don't believe that I'm the one. What do you believe about the Messiah? What will he be like? What will he do? How would you know if you met this Messiah? Would it be his lineage that would give him away? The fact that he belonged to the house of David, or something else? His wisdom, maybe, or his compassion? His vision of God's reign? Tell me, what are you looking for? There are certain questions that have the power to open up space. These are the questions that invite us to get to the heart of the matter, as in, what is it that captures our heart? What matters most? Reverend Kent Salati posed that kind of a question to us yesterday morning. Who is Jesus to you? He asked. And what part of the Jesus story describes Saugatuck Church? What we are and what we aspire to be. We divided up into small groups and spent the entire morning contemplating that question. Together, we leaned in, listened, as one by one participants said, here's what I think. And here's how the Jesus story speaks to me. I feel like we are with Jesus in the wilderness, praying and listening for guidance. Or at the well, longing for a deep and life-restoring drink of living water. Or on a hillside, trusting in God's abundance to feed 5,000 people. Or, like the parable of the sower, scattering lots of seeds to see what might take root in our midst. The responses generated by each group were rich and varied and insightful. I hope you'll get to hear more from each individual conversation by talking with the participants themselves. But as meaningful as all those responses were, there was something else, more meaningful, more impactful. And that is how the conversations unfolded. We discovered, or rediscovered, that wrestling with questions designed to get to the heart of the matter has a way of opening hearts and deepening our sense of connection with each other and perhaps with God. I'm guessing that Jesus knew this, that one well-placed question can do a whole lot more than a perfectly crafted pronouncement. That asking what a person thinks or how a person feels, and then listening intently, or creating space for people to listen to each other is the very thing that transforms lives. Just imagine what might have happened if those Pharisees had accepted Jesus' implied invitation. If they had gone back to the temple with him and begun a small group discussion about their vision of the Messiah. If they'd swapped stories about what each of them longed for over a plate of falafel and hummus. Isn't it at least conceivable that they might have stopped muttering about Jesus after that? That they might not have settled all their differences, but they might just have discovered that the Pharisees and Jesus were in love with the same God, creator of the universe, liberator of the people, that they shared some of the same hopes for the Jewish people, the same yearning for the repair of the world. Have you noticed that when we start talking about what matters most, our conversation has the power to fill up the space that might otherwise be filled with anxious, critical, worry talk? When we share our hopes and our longings with each other, it becomes a little harder to mutter and a little easier to stay focused on what matters most, loving each other, loving Jesus, loving God, and loving God's world. Which brings me back to the first half of this morning's gospel text. Because there, too, the Pharisees are asking Jesus what